Who among us hasn't dreamed of a career where we actually help build the games we love? To be the lucky person tasked with, for instance, perfecting the movement of Aerith's iconic braids, crafting the moment when Link, bearer of the Triforce of Courage, hoists aloft the Master Sword. Epic. So spare a thought for all the real-life video game animators out there who showed up to work only to find that their job today was not anything so majestic, but, for instance, making sure the bum on the Demon Souls Vanguard demon wiggles correctly when you whack it with your sword. Ew. Here are the grossest animations in games that ruin some poor animator's day. Or days. I mean, accounting for several rounds of feedback, this could be an all-week job. Beware spoilers and grossness for and in the following games.
Who's that?
Far Cry 3 could seem like a dream project for a video game artist. Sun-drenched scenery and a whole zoo's worth of exciting animals. But what if, while all the other animators are off drawing tigers or whatever, you were informed that your job today was to painstakingly craft Far Cry 3's healing animations? Which, as a reminder if you didn't play the game, are the teeth-grittingly unpleasant scenes that play out in first person when you recover health, and see main character Jason spending 2 seconds performing the kind of, quote, first aid that in an ideal world a trained surgeon would have all afternoon to prep for. Also in an ideal world, maybe a cleaner bandage? Spending 2 seconds looking at these grisly health restorers is unpleasant enough, so we can only imagine how grim it must have been for the poor artist tasked with animating from scratch these wince-inducing animations. And perhaps none would be quite so brutally unpleasant to spend a great deal of time looking at than the one where Jason, undislocates his thumb. Or should that be relocates his thumb? We don't know, but then we have the privilege of being able to spend only mere moments thinking about this mashed up digit and how painfully it gets snapped back into shape. Which is not something we can say for the animator who had to create this grisly scene, and who presumably still sees it whenever they close their eyes.
If you've never heard of trypophobia, it's a common aversion to the sight of irregular clusters of small bumps or holes, which some theorise could be down to these shapes reminding us of danger or disease, and it's something you should absolutely not Google even to see how it's spelled. Just make a guess, folks, it's not worth it. So imagine how distinctly unpleasant it must be for the animator who, having poured out that sweet hot cup of morning coffee, settles in at their workstation knowing that the whole day is going to be placing a series of irregular clustered eye sockets in the carapace of, say, Dragon Age Inquisition's Nightmare Demon.
Always the maker down.
Or making the Weavess from The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, or animating the Undertow Vigor from Bioshock Infinite. Jeez, and all of these games came out in a 3-year span? Must have been something in the water. Strengthening that theory is the fact that what is surely the apex of unpleasant irregular clusters in a video game also came out in that 3-year hell window. 2015's Bloodborne, and with it the swiveling eyes of boss enemy Rom the Vacuous Spider. Fortunately for arachnophobes, not very spidery. Unfortunately for trypophobes, the absolute worst. Rom is a mandatory boss battle in the game, and one that allows a greater than usual inspection of her horrible, horrible form. Because when you first meet Rom, she's non-aggressive, so you can feel free to take a moment to get up really close and personal to her total ick-fest features, if you're the kind of person who likes torturing yourself, but hey, I guess you're already playing Bloodborne. The bit of Rom that is undoubtedly worse though, and surely a truly miserable day at the office for some luckless animator, are the many, many eye sockets that pucker her pumice stone face. each of which features a staring, swiveling eye that can't have been nearly so quick to program as ROM's Animator doubtless wishes it had been. With each of the dozens of eyes having a slightly uneven shape, appearing to move independently, and glistening moistly, crafting this horrible bug's head must have been a sizable task. But at least all that effort is being appreciated, if that's the right word, because actually fighting Rom through her several phases of spider summoning magic takes a while, giving you plenty of time to get your fill of those creepy, unevenly clustered eyes. Look on the bright side, at least you just had to look at it and didn't have to animate it. Also, you didn't have to just say the words glistening moistly out loud. I feel like I need a shower. Ugh.
Remember Limbo? It was a black and white indie game about something or other, where you run around being some guy, or what have you. Maybe there's jumping? And we can't give you more detail than that because, like everyone else in the world who played Limbo, the bit in that game with the spider was so horribly memorable that it has expanded to blot out any other memories associated with the game. This silhouetted arachnid chased you throughout the game, notably revolting both for its size and the icky way its sharp, prowling legs were animated to explore the environment, jabbing out at you. That is, until you manage to squish the spider with a rolling rock. After this, you only see the spider once more, later in the game, now with one limb only, for a scene so gross that it surely ruined at least one animator's day, maybe several. It was a small team after all. Well, that was absolutely foul, so we have only ourselves to blame for playing Inside, the next game from developer Playdead, which after Limbo was all but guaranteed to feature something animated so ickily it would turn your stomach, and boy did they deliver. Meet the Huddle, a mass of combined human flesh and organs that you take control of towards the end of the game, assuming you can make it all the way through to the credits without vomiting at the wobbly, galloping, limb-filled mess on screen. More distressing, we actually know plenty about how the Huddle came to be animated, thanks to a 2017 Game Developers Conference talk on exactly that subject, which we recommend seeking out if you want to know how it feels to be fascinated and entirely grossed out at the same time. We know, for instance, that the Huddle was the brainchild of Andreas Norman Gruntved, but was animated by an entire team. A skinned mesh bound to dynamic bodies, whose movement was inspired by that slimy demon from Princess Mononoke and human behaviour during crowd surfing. So, that's the mosh pit ruined forever. Thanks for that, Inside.
PT, the first-person horror experience that was designed as a teaser for a cancelled Silent Hill game, features many things moving weirdly, like, oh, I don't know, this talking bag.
I could do nothing but walk.
Or how it's weird that you keep moving through this looping section of corridor, even though crap like this keeps happening. But nothing in the game moves more weirdly than Lisa, the woman who haunts the hallway you are seemingly doomed to loop through until the game ends or your heart gives out, whichever comes sooner. The terrifying Lisa is the queen of moving weirdly, thanks to a particular animation that involves her head twitching, or is vibrating the right term? Hard to pick the right word, especially as when Lisa shows up, our usual response is to clamp our eyes shut. With this patented eyes shut technique, and with this murdered ghost showing up to scare you very infrequently in the game, you probably only have to look at Lisa for a sum total of around 5 seconds in your life.
Me.
But sadly, the same cannot be said of the PT animation team, responsible for perfecting Lisa's eerie movement style. And it can't have been easy to nail that animation, being stuck as it is somewhere between shambling paranormal horror and video game NPC glitching hilariously through a wall. I mean, unless Lisa's entire animation set is just glitching because the character proved too disturbing to animate at all, we'd believe it, to be honest.
If Bloodborne maker From Software wants to spend all its time animating retch-inducing boss battles, frankly, that's their business. But none of their industry peers should have to suffer just because they're obsessed with setting off a player's gag reflex. Yet, tragically, the launch of the PlayStation 5 saw another studio dragged into that mess. Texas-based Bluepoint Games, tasked with a complete graphical overhaul of From Software's Demon's Souls. Which sounds very exciting when you're contemplating how light will play through the smoky haze of the Bolitarian Palace, or how the Tower Knight's imposing armour will gleam with next-gen beauty. Then you meet the Adjudicator boss, newly revamped by the Bluepoint folks, and realise video game graphics were a terrible mistake. There's plenty to not like about the Adjudicator, whose head appears to be a fleshy hole with a 12-foot tongue drooping out, and is controlled by a bird on top of its head, like Ratatouille if Pixar licked a bunch of toads and locked themselves in a haunted basement before making that movie. But what earns the Adjudicator a place on this list is the animation work on the fetid and bloated torso. Specifically, the knowledge that it was some unlucky artist's job to ensure this mouldy flesh monster's chest and, let's face it, those dinner plate-sized nipples had just the right amount of flopping momentum to them as the Adjudicator chases you around its pit. Spoiler alert, Bluepoint, the right amount was none. The only saving grace is that when playing Demon's Souls, you'll be so focused on dodging the horrendous sword the Adjudicator wields that you might not even clock the horrible next-gen detail with which its inhuman torso swings and bounces. Wait, is this what a teraflop is? Because I don't like it.
Just because food is in a video game does not mean it cannot look delicious. If you're feeling hungry from just watching Monster Hunter World Meal Prep, you've got Japanese developer Capcom to thank. And we can't help but wonder whether whoever got the choice role of animating this hunk of steak getting sliced and griddled to perfection ever strolled down the corridor of Capcom HQ past another culinary scene being cooked up at around the same time.
Rise and shine, sleepyhead. It's time for supper.
Well, I know which job I'd prefer. The infamous dinner scene in Resident Evil 7 is the most memorable and iconic moment in a game full of memorable moments, and that's partially down to the performance of the cast playing the Baker family, who have you kidnapped and bound to a chair for a meal more painful than Christmas dinner with that one uncle determined to have a political debate.
He's not eating it, Jack! He's not eating it! What the hell of Marguerite? For him!
But it's even more down to the look of the meal itself, a stinking heap of entrails that covers the entire table, gleaming in the candlelight. There are even flies circling to complete the grody scene. Not to mention the way the whole spread wobbles around when Jack Baker slams a knife into the table. Blech. The dinner scene is a masterclass in revulsion and grottiness, but we can't help but mourn the miserable lunch breaks of whoever had to craft this diorama, because we can't imagine you'd have much appetite after spending all morning 3D modelling a pot of innards. And just so your own next meal isn't ruined, here's some more Monster Hunter cuisine. Seriously, are these cats available to cater private events?
You've probably seen Mario die before. It looks like this. Classic, to the point, not likely to scar you forever. Are you writing this down, Nintendo? Because when Mario made the jump to 3D in Super Mario 64, Nintendo had to make some choices about how it was going to look when their treasured mascot bit the dust. And to be fair, they mostly nailed it. For example, this is how it looks in Mario 64 when Mario falls off a level.
Mamma mia!
See how we got a euphemistic fade to black? Rather than, for instance, a scene in which we see Mario slam into the ground 30,000 feet below? Well, for some reason that aversion to realism went out the window when it was time to animate Mario drowning. Yikes, that's one of the most needlessly detailed death animations we've ever seen, and we've played every Mortal Kombat. Why, we have to wonder, is it necessary for Mario to clutch at his throat, as his body impulsively gasps for air but inhales only water? Is it strictly required, we must ask, to get a glimpse of Mario's body going limp, leaving him floating lifelessly beneath the surface? And we really have to question who thought it was right and proper for Mario's legs to twitch at the point of death, his muscles firing at random as life departs the body. However grim it is to watch Mario drown, brackets very, it must have been even worse to have to animate, not to mention an odd use of resources, especially when you bear in mind this hugely ambitious game never had more than around 20 people working on it at a given time. So, if you're wondering why they had to cut Luigi from the finished product, well, I think now we know why.
So those are some of the grossest animations that ruined some poor animator's day. Can you think of any that, you were glad you only saw it for a tiny bit in the game? Because, oh boy, if you had to look at that for extended periods of time, no way! No way, Jose! Just imagine the horrible reference material that they had to look up. Anyway, can you think of any? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this, please do like, please do subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell to be told of many more videos in future, and check out all the cool streams and other videos that we do on this channel. I hope you are taking care of yourselves. Much love. Bye!